The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slipped under my apartment door like a snake through tall grass. Cream-colored cardstock with gold embossed lettering announced a celebration dinner at my parents' estate to honor my older sister Vanessa's promotion to senior partner at Morrison and Klein, one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. At the bottom, in my mother's elegant script, were the words, "Your presence is requested. Please dress appropriately." I held the invitation between my fingers, feeling the weight of expensive paper stock that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. 5 years had passed since I'd last set foot in that house. 5 years since I'd chosen to walk away from the family business to pursue my own path as a novelist. The decision had been met with cold fury from my father, theatrical disappointment from my mother, and smug satisfaction from Vanessa, who had always been the golden child, the one who did everything right. My phone buzzed. According to YouTube analytics, 99% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. A text from my younger brother Marcus. "Mom says you have to come. She's inviting the Hendersons and wants to show family unity. Please, Lily, I can't deal with her alone." Marcus was the only one who still spoke to me regularly. The only one who didn't treat my career choice as a personal betrayal. He was finishing his master's in music composition. Another disappointment to our parents, but he learned to keep his head down in ways I never could. I texted back, "I'll think about it." But I already knew I would go, some part of me. The part that still remembered being 7 years old and desperately trying to make my father smile, wanted to prove I was doing fine, more than fine. My second novel had just been acquired by a major publisher, and while the advance wasn't spectacular, it was validation that I'd made the right choice. Maybe, I thought with the eternal optimism of the chronically disappointed, this dinner could be a fresh start. I spent the week before the dinner working on revisions. My editor's notes scattered across my small desk like fallen leaves. My apartment in Brooklyn was tiny, a fourth-floor walk-up with questionable heating and a view of a brick wall, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every book on the shelves, every chipped mug in the kitchen represented choices I'd made for myself. That had to count for something. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of late September evening where summer makes one last stand before autumn claims its territory. I chose a simple navy dress, elegant but understated, paired with the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me before she passed. Looking at myself in the mirror, I saw a 28-year-old woman who'd worked 3 jobs while finishing her first novel, who'd survived rejection after rejection, who'd built a life on her own terms. I lifted my chin. I could do this. The drive to Greenwich took 90 minutes, each mile adding weight to my chest. The estate looked exactly as I remembered, imposing iron gates, a winding driveway through manicured gardens, the colonial mansion rising like a monument to old money and older expectations. Cars lined the circular drive, Mercedes, BMW, a Bentley that probably belonged to the Hendersons. I parked my 10-year-old Honda Civic at the end of the line, its rust spots glinting in the golden hour light. Marcus met me at the door, pulling me into a quick hug. At 24, he'd grown into his height, but his eyes still held that cautious watchfulness we'd both developed as children, always reading the room, always preparing for the next criticism. "You look great," he whispered. "Fair warning, Vanessa's been holding court in the living room for the past hour. She's insufferable. As opposed to usually," he cracked a smile, "exponentially worse. And Mom's been asking everyone if they've heard of any real writers, dropping names like Franzen and Atwood." My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. Good to know what I'm walking into. The house smelled of expensive perfume and catered hors d'oeuvres. In the grand living room, about 30 people mingled in clusters, champagne flutes catching the light from the crystal chandelier. I recognized most of them. Family friends, business associates, people who measured worth in stock portfolios and club memberships. My mother spotted me first. Eleanor Preston had been beautiful once, and she'd maintained that beauty through rigorous discipline and excellent cosmetic work. She wore a dove-gray dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon. "Lillian," she said, my full name a weapon in her mouth. She air-kissed near my cheeks, her perfume overwhelming. "How good of you to make it. We weren't sure you'd come, given your unconventional schedule." "I wouldn't miss Vanessa's celebration," I said evenly. Of course. Her smile was practiced, perfect, empty. You remember the Hendersons. Gerald is now on the board at Morrison and Klein, and their son Christopher just made junior partner. She steered me toward a cluster of people where Christopher Henderson stood, tall and confident in a tailored suit. We dated briefly in college before I realized he was more interested in my last name than in me. Lily, he said warmly, extending his hand. It's been years. Mom mentioned you're still writing? The way he said still made it sound like a phase I hadn't outgrown, like collecting dolls or believing in Santa Claus. I am. My second novel comes out next spring with Hartwell Press. How nice, Mrs. Henderson interjected, her tone suggesting it was anything but. A hobby can be so fulfilling. My niece does scrapbooking. I felt my smile crystallize on my face. But before I could respond, Vanessa appeared, resplendent in emerald silk that matched her eyes. She'd always been beautiful in that sharp, calculated way, every hair in place, every gesture rehearsed. Baby? Sister, she exclaimed, though there was nothing warm in it. Everyone, this is Lillian, our little artiste. Still typing away in that charming little apartment, I assume? It's a good space for writing, I replied. I'm sure it is. She linked her arm through Christopher's with possessive ease. Chris and I were just discussing the partnership track at the firm. It's so demanding. You really have to commit everything to it. But I suppose when you don't have real responsibilities, you can dabble in creative pursuits. The room had quieted slightly, people sensing blood in the water. This was always Vanessa's gift, making cruelty look like casual conversation. Actually, I said carefully, writing a novel requires quite a lot of— Oh, I'm sure it does, my mother interrupted brightly, though I must admit I still haven't quite finished your first book, dear. I keep meaning to, but it's just so dense. Not like the lovely mysteries I usually read. Laughter rippled through the group, gentle and poisonous. My father chose that moment to call everyone to dinner. Robert Preston commanded attention the way mountains command respect. Immovable, imposing, and entirely convinced of his own importance. He didn't acknowledge my presence as we filed into the dining room, where a table stretched beneath yet another chandelier, set with china that had been in the family for generations. I found myself seated between Marcus and an elderly cousin who spent the first course detailing her various medical procedures. Across the table, Vanessa held court, Christopher at her side, my parents beaming at either end like proud monarchs surveying their kingdom. The food was exquisite and tasted like sawdust in my mouth. I pushed risotto around my plate, nodding at appropriate intervals, while Vanessa recounted her brilliant courtroom victories. With each story, the praise grew louder, the affirmation more effusive. A toast, my father announced as dessert was being served. He stood, his glass raised, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. To Vanessa, who has achieved what we always knew she would. Senior partner at 33, you've made this family proud. Crystal clinked as everyone raised their glasses. I lifted mine, the champagne bitter on my tongue. And, my father continued, his eyes finally landing on me with something like pity, we're grateful that all our children could be here tonight, even those who've chosen more alternative paths. It's important to remember that success comes in many forms, even if some forms are more traditional and more lucrative than others. The silence that followed was excruciating. I felt every eye in the room on me, measuring, judging, finding me wanting. Vanessa's smile was triumphant. Oh, Daddy, don't be mean. I'm sure Lily's little books bring joy to someone. And really, not everyone can handle the pressure of a real career. Some people are just more suited to softer pursuits. My mother nodded sympathetically. We've always supported your choices, Lillian, even when we didn't understand them. Though I do wish you'd at least tried the family business. You were so bright in school. Before you decided to waste it, my father added, sitting back down heavily. The words hung in the air like smoke. I set down my fork carefully, my hands trembling slightly. This was why they'd invited me, not for reconciliation or family unity, but for this, a public execution, a reminder of my place in their hierarchy. The prodigal daughter who'd strayed, presented as a cautionary tale. Marcus touched my arm under the table, a gesture of solidarity, but I couldn't look at him. If I did, I might cry, and I refused to give them that satisfaction. I think I said quietly, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. That I should go. Oh, don't be dramatic, Vanessa said with a laugh. We're just teasing. You're so sensitive, Lily. You always have been. Sit down, my father commanded. We're not finished with dinner. But I was already standing, my napkin placed beside my untouched chocolate torte. Thank you for inviting me. Congratulations, Vanessa. I walked out of that dining room with my head high, even as I heard the murmurs starting behind me, the whispers about how I couldn't take a joke, how I'd always been too emotional, too fragile. Marcus caught up with me in the foyer. Lily, wait. I'm fine, I said, though tears were already threatening. I just need to go. He hugged me tightly. They're horrible. You know that, right? You didn't deserve that. I know. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. I drove back to Brooklyn in a blur, tears finally falling once I was safely on the highway, away from those pitying, judging eyes. I'd been foolish to hope for anything different. They would never see me as anything but a disappointment, a cautionary tale about throwing away privilege. The next morning, I woke with swollen eyes and a determination to prove them all wrong. Not for them, I was done seeking their approval, but for myself. I threw myself into revisions with renewed fury, working 12-hour days, fueled by coffee and spite. My editor loved the changes. My agent called with news that a major review publication wanted an early copy. Weeks passed. I avoided my mother's calls, sent brief texts to Marcus to let him know I was okay. The humiliation of that dinner had settled into a cold, hard thing in my chest, but I used it, channeled it into my work. If they thought I was wasting my life, I'd show them exactly what that waste could produce. Then, 6 weeks after the dinner, everything changed. It started with a phone call from my agent, Rebecca, her voice vibrating, with an excitement I'd never heard before. Lily, you need to sit down. I'm already sitting. The New York Times. They're giving you the front page of the book review. The reviewer is calling it a searing, brilliant examination of family, ambition, and the courage to forge your own path. They're predicting bestseller lists, major awards. Lily, this is it. This is the call every writer dreams of. The room tilted slightly. Are you serious? I have the advance copy right here. I'm reading you the headline. Debut novelist Lillian Preston announces herself as a major literary voice. They're comparing you to Anne Tyler and Celeste Ng. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Rebecca continued, reading excerpts from the review, each word more glowing than the last. When she finished, she added, That's not all. Since the review leaked in industry circles, I've had 3 producers call about film rights. HBO wants to meet about adapting it as a limited series. Your publisher is rushing to increase the first print run. Lily, your entire life is about to change. After we hung up, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the brick wall outside my window, and started to laugh, then cry, then laugh again. The review published on Sunday. By Monday morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Interview requests from NPR, The Today Show, Good Morning America. My publisher scheduled a 10-city book tour. Hartwell Press ordered a second printing before the first had even shipped. By Tuesday, advance copies were being sold on eBay for $300. Wednesday brought news that a famous actress wanted the lead role in the adaptation. Thursday, my agent called to say we had a bidding war for the film rights that had already exceeded $500,000. And through it all, radio silence from my family. Until Friday, when my mother called. Lillian, darling, she gushed, as if the dinner had never happened. We've been trying to reach you all week. We saw the Times review. Everyone's been calling us, congratulating us on your success. Your father and I always knew you had talent. We just worried about the practical aspects, you understand. But this is wonderful, simply wonderful. I held the phone away from my ear, staring at it like it was a foreign object. We're having a small gathering this weekend, she continued without pausing. Just family and close friends. The Hendersons are coming, of course, and we'd love for you to be there. We could celebrate your news properly. I'm actually booked solid, I said, my voice cool. Interviews and meetings. Oh, a pause. Well, surely you could spare an evening for your family. We're so proud of you, sweetheart. We're so proud of you. The words I'd craved my entire life, now hollow and meaningless, arriving only when my success could be packaged and displayed for their friends. I'll see what I can do. I said noncommittally and ended the call. Marcus texted immediately. Mom's having a party. Please tell me you're not going. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I typed back, surprising myself. Because suddenly I wanted to go. Not for them, but to witness what came next. Because karma, I was learning, worked in mysterious ways. The second invitation arrived via express mail, even more elaborate than the first. My mother had pulled out all the stops. This wasn't just a small gathering, it was a full event, a celebration of our daughter's remarkable achievement. The same people who'd watched my humiliation 6 weeks ago were invited to witness my triumph. I bought a new dress for the occasion, crimson silk that made me feel like a warrior going into battle. My publisher sent an advance copy of the book with its stunning cover, a bird breaking free from a gilded cage. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of validation, of proof that I'd been right to follow my instincts. The Saturday of the party arrived with crisp October air and clear skies. This time, when I pulled up to the estate, I noticed my Honda Civic didn't look quite so out of place. It was honest, functional, paid for with my own money. That meant something. The transformation in my mother's demeanor was almost comical. She swept down the front steps in a cloud of perfume and enthusiasm, pulling me into an embrace that felt like a performance for the other arriving guests. There she is, our celebrated author. She held me at arm's length, beaming. You look absolutely stunning, darling. Come in, come in. Everyone's dying to see you. The living room was packed with the same crowd from Vanessa's dinner, but the energy was different. People approach me with genuine interest now, asking about my writing process, my inspiration, my next project. I fielded questions with practiced grace, having learned from a week of constant interviews. Christopher Henderson appeared at my elbow, his smile warm. Lily, congratulations. I have to admit, I never saw this coming, but I'm impressed, really impressed. Thank you, I said neutrally. I actually picked up a copy of your first novel after seeing the review. Started it last night. Couldn't put it down. You have a real gift. Before I could respond, my father's voice boomed across the room. Lillian, come here. I want you to meet someone. Robert Preston stood with a distinguished older gentleman who I vaguely recognized. My father's hand landed heavily on my shoulder, the first physical affection I could remember from him in years. This is Bernard Kaufman, CEO of Kaufman Industries. Bernie, this is my daughter, the writer. The Times called her book brilliant. Can you imagine? He said it with proprietary pride, as if he'd had anything to do with my success. Bernard shook my hand warmly, asking intelligent questions about my work that suggested he'd actually read the review. As we talked, I noticed my father hovering, nodding along, interjecting with comments like, I always told her she had talent, and we encouraged her creativity from a young age. The lies came so easily to him, I almost believed them myself. Vanessa appeared, Christopher trailing behind her smile tight. Quite the party, Lily. Mom really went all out. It's lovely, I agreed. I'm sure. You're enjoying this. Her tone had an edge. All the attention. It's been an interesting week. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. Don't let it go to your head. One good review doesn't make a career. The publishing world is fickle. Next month they'll have moved on to someone else. I met her eyes steadily. You might be right, but at least I built something on my own terms. Not because it was expected of me. Her expression flickered, surprise, then anger, then a careful blankness. Before she could respond, my mother called everyone to attention. Friends, family, Eleanor Preston announced, standing by the fireplace with my father beside her. We're so grateful you could join us to celebrate Lillian's extraordinary achievement. When she first told us she wanted to be a writer, we admit we were concerned. It's such a difficult path, so uncertain, but we supported her dreams, encouraged her passion, and now we're thrilled to see her vindicated. I felt Marcus move closer to my side, his presence a silent commentary on our mother's revisionist history. Robert and I always knew Lillian was special, she continued, her voice rich with emotion that might have been genuine if I didn't know better. We're so proud of the woman she's become, the risks she's taken, the success she's earned. To Lillian! Glasses raised again, but this time the toast was for me. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt oddly hollow, watching them celebrate a version of events that had never happened, claim credit for support they'd never given. Then my phone buzzed, and buzzed again, and again. I glanced down discreetly. Messages from my agent, my editor, numbers I didn't recognize. Something was happening. My heart began to race. "Excuse me," I murmured to Marcus. Slipping into the hallway, I called Rebecca. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're sitting down." "Rebecca, I'm at a family thing. You just hit #1 on the Times bestseller list. Advanced orders. The book doesn't even officially release for 2 more weeks, and you're already #1. Lily, I've never seen anything like this. The buzz is unprecedented." My legs went weak. I leaned against the wall, trying to process what she was saying. "There's more," Rebecca continued. "The film rights? Warner Brothers just offered $1.2 million, and I got a call from the Pulitzer Committee. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but you're on the short list. Your book is being taught at Columbia next semester. You're everywhere, Lily. This isn't just success. It's a phenomenon." I stood in that hallway, the same hallway where I'd hidden as a child after another of my father's criticisms, where I'd cried after being compared unfavorably to Vanessa for the 1,000th time, and felt something inside me finally, fully break free. When I returned to the living room, I must have looked different, because Marcus immediately came over. "What happened?" "#1, I whispered. "The book's #1. His eyes went wide. "Lily," but my mother was approaching, her smile strained. "Darling, is everything all right? You look flushed." "I just got some news," I said, loud enough that nearby conversations paused. My book hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. The room erupted. People rushed over, congratulating me, asking questions. My mother's expression was a complicated mixture of pride and something else. Maybe recognition that this success was now too big for her to claim any part of. My father appeared, pumping my hand like I was a business associate, already calculating how this reflected on him. Through the crowd, I saw Vanessa standing alone by the window, her face a carefully maintained mask that couldn't quite hide the shock and something darker underneath. Christopher had abandoned her to join the celebration around me. Mrs. Henderson grasped my hands. "My dear, you must come to dinner next week. I've been telling everyone about how I've known you since you were a girl, how special you always were." The same woman who'd compared my writing to her niece's scrapbooking 6 weeks ago. The party continued for hours, but it had transformed into something else entirely. People who'd barely acknowledged me at Vanessa's dinner now hung on my every word. They asked for signed copies, for advice for their own aspiring writer children, for introductions to my agent. My father told anyone who would listen about how he'd always supported my dreams, how he'd told me to follow my passion, despite practical concerns. I played along, smiling until my face ached, accepting congratulations from people who'd witnessed my humiliation and done nothing, who were now eager to bask in reflected glory. It was surreal and exhausting, and oddly satisfying to watch them scramble to rewrite history in real time. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Vanessa cornered me in the kitchen, where I'd gone to refill my water glass. "Congratulations," she said flatly. "You must be thrilled." "I am," I replied, honestly. She poured herself wine with hands that weren't quite steady. "You know this doesn't change anything, right? Mom and Dad will always see me as—" "Vanessa," I interrupted gently. "I don't care what they see anymore. That's the difference between us. You're still performing for them, measuring your worth by their approval. I'm free of that." Her laugh was bitter. "Free? You're here, aren't you? At their party, accepting their fake pride." "I'm here to bear witness," I said, "to see karma work in real time." "Karma?" She set down her glass hard enough that wine sloshed. "You think this is karma? You got lucky. One successful book doesn't—" "I'm not talking about me." I kept my voice even, calm. "I'm talking about you, about Mom and Dad, about all of you who needed me to fail so you could feel successful. You didn't just humiliate me at your dinner, Vanessa. You revealed who you really are, and now you have to live with everyone knowing it." She stared at me, and for just a moment, I saw past the perfect facade to the insecurity underneath, the constant need to prove herself, to be the best, to win at all costs. And I felt something unexpected. Pity. "I hope the partnership makes you happy," I said sincerely. "I really do, but I think we both know it won't, because you're chasing their approval, not your own fulfillment." I left her there and went to find Marcus. He was on the back terrace, looking out over the gardens where we'd played as children before life got complicated. You okay? He asked as I joined him. Yeah, actually, I think I really am. He smiled. You were amazing in there. Cool as ice. I had a good teacher, I said, bumping his shoulder with mine. You're the one who's been dealing with their expectations while staying true to yourself. That takes real courage. Maybe we're both pretty brave, he suggested. Maybe we are. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the last of the guests trickle out to their expensive cars, carrying with them new stories to tell about the Preston family's brilliant daughter, the writer. Not the one they'd expected to celebrate, but that made it all the more interesting for them. Inside, I could hear my mother's voice, high and excited, already planning how to leverage my success for social advantage. My father was probably calculating the business connections he could make through my newfound celebrity. Vanessa was likely repairing her composure, preparing to face Christopher and his family with her usual confidence. And I felt nothing but a distant, peaceful detachment. I'm not coming back here, I said quietly. Not for holidays or celebrations or performances of family unity. I'm done. Marcus nodded. Can I visit you in Brooklyn? Anytime. You're always welcome. A week later, I did my first television interview on a major morning show. They asked about my inspiration, my writing process, my sudden rise to success. I answered honestly about the struggle, the doubt, the years of working multiple jobs while pursuing a dream that seemed impossible. Your family must be so proud, the host said warmly. I paused, considering my answer carefully. The old Lily would have deflected, would have played along with the expected narrative. But I learned something about the power of truth, about the freedom that comes from refusing to participate in lies. My family's relationship with my success is complicated, I said. They didn't support my choice to be a writer. They saw it as a waste of my potential, a rejection of their values. But I learned that the only approval I really needed was my own. Sometimes the greatest gift is being freed from the burden of other people's expectations. The interview went viral. Publications ran think pieces about family dynamics, about women forging their own paths, about the courage to disappoint people who would never be satisfied anyway. I received thousands of messages from people who'd felt similar pressure, who'd struggled with similar disappointments. My story resonated because it was true, because I'd refused to sugarcoat it. My mother called, furious about how I'd portrayed the family. My father left a voicemail about respecting privacy. Vanessa sent a brief text. Thanks for making us all look terrible. I deleted the messages and went back to writing my next novel. 6 months later, my book had sold 2 million copies. The film adaptation was in pre-production with a director I'd admired for years. I'd moved to a larger apartment in Brooklyn, with actual sunlight and a view of the park. Marcus visited regularly, having finally admitted to our parents that he was pursuing music composition seriously and didn't care about their approval either. The Pulitzer shortlist announcement came on a Tuesday. When I made the final list, Rebecca called screaming. My editor sent champagne. My publisher increased my advance for the next book to numbers I'd never dreamed possible. I didn't call my parents to tell them. They found out from the news, like everyone else. The award ceremony was in April, a glittering event filled with people whose work I'd admired for years. I wore a gown the color of midnight, my grandmother's pearls at my throat, and felt like exactly who I was supposed to be. I didn't win the Pulitzer. It went to a stunning historical novel about the civil rights movement that absolutely deserved the recognition. But sitting there among the nominees, surrounded by the literary community that had embraced me, I realized winning didn't matter. I'd already received everything I needed: validation of my work, freedom from toxic expectations, and the knowledge that I'd succeeded on my own terms. At the after party, a young woman approached me nervously. Ms. Preston, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to thank you. I was going to law school to make my parents happy, but after reading your book and that interview about family expectations, I withdrew. I'm going to pursue what I actually love. Your courage gave me courage. I hugged her, this stranger whose life I'd touched without knowing it. Don't let anyone tell you your dreams are worthless, I told her. The only wasted life is one lived for someone else's approval. She left with tears in her eyes and hope on her face, and I understood then what karma really meant. Not revenge or comeuppance, but balance restored. The universe finding equilibrium. I'd suffered humiliation with dignity, had refused to seek revenge or stoop to their level, And life had rewarded that restraint with something better than vindication: genuine success, meaningful work, and the peace that comes from authentic living. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Saw you on TV looking gorgeous. Family dinner here next weekend? I'm cooking. I smiled and typed back, wouldn't miss it. That was my family now. The people who'd stood by me when it cost them something, who loved me for who I was rather than what I could do for them. Marcus, Rebecca, my editor Diane, a circle of writer friends who understood the struggle and celebrated the victories. As for my parents and Vanessa, I heard through Marcus that they still bragged about me to their friends, still claimed credit for my success, still displayed my book prominently in the house. They'd invited me to Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. Invitations I politely declined through my assistant. I didn't hate them. I'd moved beyond hate into something more peaceful: indifference. They were people who'd hurt me, yes, but they were also people trapped in their own narrow definitions of worth and success. They'd lived their lives by those measurements, and I'd lived mine by different ones. The spotlight they'd tried to deny me had found me anyway, brighter than any of us had imagined. Not because I'd fought for it or demanded it, but because I'd stayed true to my voice, even when everyone told me that voice didn't matter. That was the real karma, the real justice: living well, creating meaningful work, finding joy in the path they'd mocked. Every book I wrote, every interview I gave, every reader I touched was proof that their judgment had been wrong, that their cruelty had been pointless, that I'd been right to walk away. I didn't steal the spotlight so much as I built my own, one word at a time, one page at a time, one truth at a time. And now it shone bright enough to light my way forward into a future of my own making. The girl who'd sat at that dinner table 6 months ago, choking down humiliation with expensive risotto, felt like a stranger now. Or maybe she'd always been me, the real me, waiting for permission to fully exist. The dinner hadn't humiliated me. It had liberated me. It had shown me clearly, finally, that I owed these people nothing but honesty, and the most honest thing I could do was succeed spectacularly without them. As I left the awards ceremony that night, walking out into the spring air with my head high and my future bright, I felt something I'd never felt in my family's presence: complete, unapologetic, triumphant joy. And that, more than any award or bestseller list or Hollywood adaptation, was the real victory. Not just success, but the freedom to own it entirely, to know that every word I'd written, every risk I'd taken, every disappointment I'd weathered had been mine alone. The spotlight wasn't stolen. It was earned, and it was exactly where I belonged.